Black CEO pushed out of the lift by reception. 20 minutes later, he fired the office manager. Rain hammered the glass walls of the skyscraper, streaking the marble lobby in shifting silver. Elias Carter stepped inside, carrying nothing but a leather journal and an air of unshaken confidence. His shoes clicked against the polished floor, steady, deliberate, until a voice cut through the hum. "You can't take that lift." The receptionist, Karen Wells, had risen sharply from her desk, eyes narrowing as if she had caught an intruder. She moved in front of him, arms crossed, chin lifted with authority that didn't belong to her. The hum of conversation around the lobby fractured into whispers. Phones paused mid-scroll. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. I said, "That's for executives only." Her words sliced through the room, sharp enough to sting. Elias stood motionless, gaze fixed on the mirrored doors behind her. The journal shifted in his hand as if holding back something unsaid. Karen leaned closer, voice hardening. "Show me your badge, or use the service elevator." A hush rippled through the lobby. A barista froze mid-pour. A security guard shifted, but didn't intervene. For a moment, Elias simply breathed, the storm's thunder echoing like a drum roll above. His calm unnerved her more than defiance ever could. And then, he smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. Nobody in that room knew who he was. Nobody realized the man being blocked would decide the future of this office before the storm cleared. 20 minutes later, the same receptionist who stood so boldly would be left speechless, and the woman upstairs, the office manager, would be out of a job. What unfolded between those 2 points would shake everyone watching. Rain surged harder against the skyscraper's vast glass panes, streaking the lobby with restless silver. The hum of morning traffic below mixed with thunder's distant growl, creating an atmosphere that felt charged, unsettled, alive with tension. Elias Carter stood calm at the edge of the executive lift, leather journal steady in his hand, presence quiet yet undeniable. His posture carried dignity earned through decades of resilience, but the receptionist across from him saw none of it. Karen Wells, precise in her pressed blazer and clipped tone, tightened her stance like a gatekeeper protecting forbidden ground. "Sir, that elevator isn't for you," she said firmly, though her words carried something sharper than protocol. The words spread across the lobby, thin but biting, pulling glances from strangers waiting with umbrellas dripping rainwater onto marble floors. Elias tilted his head slightly, offering patience where others might have given offense. "I'm headed to the 25th floor," he said, measured, respectful, offering no apology. Karen stepped forward, arms folded, her heels striking the polished stone with pointed certainty. "That lift is strictly for executives. Guests and contractors are expected to use the service bank behind the atrium." Her phrasing left no room for interpretation, yet her eyes narrowed with assumption. The air carried judgment heavier than the storm outside. Elias adjusted the journal under his arm but refused to move. His silence spoke of boundaries unshaken by someone else's misperception. Behind them, the double doors parted, admitting Linda Hayes, the office manager, whose presence added corporate weight to the conflict. Linda's clipped stride conveyed authority sharpened by years of defending hierarchy, rules, and the unseen walls dividing belonging from exclusion. "Karen, is something wrong?" she asked, voice tinged with expectation that her subordinate had done well to intervene. "This gentleman insists on using the executive lift without clearance," Karen replied quickly, eager for support. Linda's gaze swept Elias, scanning sweater, slacks, and journal as though she were appraising credentials invisible to her. Her lips pressed into a line. "Company policy is clear. Service elevators exist for a reason. Please comply." Around them, the lobby's energy shifted. Bystanders sensing conflict leaned discreetly closer, whispers filling spaces between thunderclaps. One of those witnesses, Jamal Pierce, a young intern clutching a satchel, hesitated before raising his phone. He tapped record, heart racing, eyes darting nervously as he captured the unfolding exchange. No one noticed him tucked near a pillar, yet he felt the moment's weight pressing responsibility onto his shoulders. At the far side of the lobby, Sarah Lynn, a junior analyst balancing coffee and folders, slowed her pace. She recognized something unsettling in the scene, a man calm, respectful, yet treated like an outsider by voices cloaked in authority. The storm rattled the windows harder, streaks of water blurring the skyline beyond. Karen adjusted her stance, chin lifted higher, conviction carved into every movement. "Identification!" she demanded, tone clipped like steel. Her insistence implied doubt too deep to disguise. Elias exhaled quietly, measured in patience. "I don't believe that's necessary," he replied, voice steady. Linda interjected before Karen could push further. "This building houses valuable assets and sensitive information. Compliance protects us all. Kindly follow directions." The phrasing dripped with professionalism, but concealed the presumption that his place here needed justification. Jamal's recording caught it all. The fide, stiff posture of Karen, the curt authority of Linda, and the composed restraint of the man they sought to diminish. The recording would later speak louder than any defense. For now, the room existed in suspended tension, air cold, every eye waiting for resolution. Sarah's steps faltered as she recalled meetings where unspoken assumptions cut just as deep as words. Her instincts whispered this man wasn't who they thought. Karen, however, pressed harder, voice lowering but edged with finality. "Sir, you're holding up others. Please don't make this difficult." The executive lift's brushed steel doors gleamed behind her, reflecting fragments of the lobby's light, almost mocking the standoff. Elias's eyes flicked to them briefly, then returned to Karen's determined gaze. He didn't flinch. His silence stretched long enough to feel like defiance, though no aggression colored his stance. Linda's voice rose over the building's hum. "If you refuse to comply, I will have no choice but to escalate." Her phrasing suggested escalation meant security, removal, humiliation, wrapped in procedure. Jamal's thumb tightened on his phone. His pulse hammered as he realized he was documenting more than policy enforcement. He was recording bias, naked and raw, disguised beneath corporate etiquette. Sarah gripped her folders tighter, caught between duty to keep walking and conscience urging her to pause. The storm outside pounded harder, as though echoing the injustice within. Lightning flared, illuminating faces in stark light, and for a second, every figure in the lobby seemed carved from glass. Karen's insistence didn't falter. "This is your final warning." Her voice carried like a gavel striking wood. Elias remained composed, eyes unblinking, tone even. "My business requires me here. I will not take the service elevator." His calm contradicted the tension rising around him. It unsettled Karen, though she disguised unease with sharper authority. Linda shifted beside her, adjusting her tablet like a weapon. "Name your supervisor. I'll confirm with management." Her request revealed an assumption woven so tightly into her thinking that she couldn't imagine the possibility before her. Sarah's eyes widened slightly as memory surfaced. An article she had read weeks ago featuring a black executive reshaping industries with quiet brilliance. She studied Elias more closely, suspicion dawning but unspoken. Meanwhile, Jamal zoomed his camera, capturing every detail. The rain streaks blurring windows, Karen's badge glinting, Linda's tightening jaw, and Elias's unwavering composure. The recording wasn't simply a video, it was testimony. Karen's voice rose again, sharper, harsher. "This is your last chance. Cooperate." Elias adjusted his stance slightly, journal still cradled under his arm, presence unbroken. Thunder shook the building, rattling fixtures. The storm and confrontation became indistinguishable, each amplifying the other. For Jamal, the parallels struck deep. He remembered his cousin refused service at a restaurant despite reservations, his friend stopped by the police without cause, and his own uneasy silence when teachers doubted him more harshly than others. Unfair judgment had been a constant background noise in his life. Now, he was capturing proof of it striking someone else, someone who carried himself with power hidden beneath humility. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "Ever seen someone judged too quickly? Share your thoughts below." The words, meant quietly, would echo later when his recording spread. Karen shifted her body in front of the polished steel doors just as the elevator chimed, her frame stiff as if blocking a vault. The reflective surface caught her determined expression, making it appear as though two guards stood in his way instead of one. Elias Carter, steady as stone, adjusted the leather journal under his arm, but did not move. Thunder cracked across the city skyline, rattling the windows, sending streaks of light across the marble lobby. The storm outside felt synchronized with the rising conflict within, each boom amplifying the hostility. "Sir, step aside," Karen insisted, tone clipped, blocking the narrow gap as though her authority alone was a barrier enough. She lifted her hand slightly, palm out, daring him to attempt crossing. "Policy is not optional. Identify yourself or use the service elevator like everyone else." Elias's gaze didn't waver, voice carrying calm that only magnified her agitation. "My meeting's on the 25th floor." His tone was unhurried, unshaken, like water flowing around rock. He didn't add more, didn't bend under her demand, and that refusal to explain himself unsettled her more than defiance ever could. Linda Hayes tightened her grip on the tablet in her hands, posture squaring as she took over the exchange. "Mr. She hesitated, unwilling to attach a name she did not know. "If you're contracted for maintenance, you are required to present credentials. This building is high security, and executives expect us to enforce that. Please, cooperate." She spoke as though explaining policy to a child, voice dipped in condescension. Elias simply replied, "My meeting's on the 25th. No elaboration, no frustration, just unshaken repetition that carried more power than any argument. His words turned into a mirror, forcing them to confront their own assumptions. The atmosphere thickened. Jamal Pierce, crouched near the pillar. Camera still rolling, swallowed hard. The lens captured everything. The storm-lit flashes, the receptionist's stiff posture, the office manager's commanding tone, and Elias's restrained resolve. His heart pounded, but his hands held steady. Understanding this recording was becoming larger than the lobby itself. Sarah Lynn froze mid-step, clutching her folders, eyes narrowing as recognition tugged at the edges of her memory. She couldn't place it fully yet, but she knew she had seen this man somewhere. Something about his composure contradicted everything Karen and Linda projected onto him. He didn't carry himself like a contractor begging clearance. He carried himself like the ground beneath him belonged to him. Around them, employees trickling. Through the lobby slowed. Some whispered, others openly stared. The spectacle had grown magnetic, a theater of authority and defiance without raised voices or movement. The storm struck again, lights flickering overhead. For a heartbeat, the lobby dimmed, shadows stretching long, before brightness returned, pulling gasps from a few onlookers. Karen pressed harder, stepping closer, her badge glinting under the fluorescent glare. "I'm not going to ask again," she snapped. "You're obstructing access for people who actually belong here." Her choice of words dripped with venom, making Sarah's stomach twist. Elias didn't blink. His stillness cut sharper than resistance. "Then allow me through." That steady request struck her like insolence. She thrust her arm outward, blocking the narrow opening just as the elevator doors began sliding wider. The sudden motion drew audible murmurs from the growing crowd. Linda joined her, shifting slightly to flank Karen, two barriers against one man who hadn't raised his voice once. Linda's tone sharpened. "Sir, I will call building security if you do not comply. Present identification now. This is a professional environment, not a place for games." Her words carried finality, as though the consequence was already decided. Elias tilted his head, calm expression unwavering. "I don't play games." The simple line, delivered without heat, sliced through the lobby like thunder itself. Several employees exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing the weight beneath his restraint. Jamal zoomed closer, capturing Karen's jaw tightening, Linda's nostrils flaring, Elias's unmovable presence. Sarah's pulse quickened, recognition itched at her brain. She remembered a headline about Carter Enterprises acquiring major firms and remembered an article mentioning a visionary leader. Could this be the man standing here? Her throat dried at the thought. Karen leaned nearer, eyes narrowing. "If you truly had business here, you'd have a badge. I have what I need," Elias said evenly. "You're wasting everyone's time," Linda cut in. "No," Elias replied softly. "You are." The silence that followed roared louder than the storm. Employees clustered by the cafe counter stared openly now, sensing the weight of the moment. Jamal's recording documented not only words but the hush that came after, that heavy pause where truth pressed against perception. The storm boomed, lights flickered again, this time holding, longer in dimness before returning. Someone muttered, "Crazy morning?" Others shifted uncomfortably. Karen, cheeks flushed, stood firm, blocking still. "Contractors don't get exceptions. If you're not here legitimately, leave." Elias's voice held no tremor. "Legitimacy isn't yours to define." It was Sarah who inhaled sharply at that, her mind connecting dots. She remembered the photograph, the profile piece on rising executives. It wasn't a perfect match, magazine portraits, polished faces, but she could see it now. She whispered under her breath, "It's him," though no one heard. Jamal's camera never stopped. His chest tightened as he thought of all the times he'd felt eyes on him, doubting him for nothing. Watching this man stay composed while walls of presumption closed in struck a deep chord. His inner voice echoed outward, almost unconsciously. "Ever felt someone wasn't who they seemed? Drop your city below and let's see where this hits." He whispered the words while framing the shot, unaware that later those lines would become captions replayed millions of times. The receptionist's authority faltered slightly under Elias's unwavering calm, yet she pushed forward. "Final warning," she said, voice sharp as glass. "Show proof or leave before security escorts you out." Elias met her stare unbothered. "My meeting's on the 25th floor." Linda shifted uncomfortably, realizing her authority felt thinner, against his steadiness, but pride anchored her. She raised her tablet higher, pretending to document him, though unease flickered in her eyes. The storm rattled louder than before. Rain slammed against windows like thrown pebbles, each impact amplifying unease. The lights dimmed once more, plunging the lobby into near darkness before flickering back alive, startling several bystanders. Still, Elias never moved except to shift his grip on the journal. Karen stepped closer again, practically inches away, as though proximity could break his calm. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, the words more personal than professional now. His answer was silence. Silence that carried weight heavier than any title. Jamal swallowed, fingers cramping from holding his phone so long, but he didn't stop. Sarah, breathing unevenly, knew with growing certainty that this wasn't an ordinary man. This was someone who commanded power without needing to declare it. And the people confronting him were unraveling in front of everyone. Employees continued to gather, some whispering, some recording on their own devices. The lobby transformed into a stage, and Elias's stillness became the spotlight. Karen's hand twitched as though tempted to grab his arm, but she hesitated. Linda cleared her throat, voice sharp again, though strain cracked beneath. "Security will be here any moment. This is your last opportunity." Elias finally shifted slightly, his voice low but steady. "Opportunities work both ways." The storm roared in answer, and the lobby braced for what would follow. The storm outside reached its peak, rain hammering the windows like a relentless drumline, thunder splitting the sky with raw power that reverberated through the marble lobby. Lightning bathed the hall in quick bursts of white, making faces flicker, like frames in an old reel. The storm's violence seemed timed to the tension inside, both pressing toward climax. Elias Carter stood unmoved, leather journal tucked calmly under his arm, every inch of him radiating restraint. His stillness was so profound it unnerved his challengers more than any outburst could have. Karen Wells, cheeks flushed, arms rigid across her chest, pressed herself even tighter against the elevator doors. She leaned forward as if proximity might intimidate him. "You've ignored every request," she declared, voice trembling under its forced edge. "Security will arrive any second. You won't talk your way past me." Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he lowered his gaze to the journal, its cover glistening faintly under fluorescent lights. For the first time since the confrontation began, he moved with purpose, flipping the journal open just enough to reveal embossed pages lined with discreet markings. He whispered, voice barely audible, "Nia, log this moment." The words carried weight, though delivered gently, as if speaking into the storm itself. To others, it sounded like talking to himself. Yet something subtle occurred. His voice activated a hidden protocol, invisible to the untrained eye, but the journal pulsed faintly, like technology woven seamlessly into leather. The flicker went unnoticed by most, though Sarah Lynn, watching intently, saw the brief glow reflect against the steel elevator doors. Her breath caught. Karen scoffed, mistaking the whisper for a distraction. "Are you mocking me? Talking to your notebook like that will not change a thing." Linda Hayes, emboldened by her colleague's words, straightened, tablet lifted high. "Sir, enough theatrics. This is business property. You have wasted time, disrupted workflow, and refused to comply with standard procedures. Tell me your contractor number now, or prepare to be escorted out." "You are finished here." But Elias's composure did not crack. His eyes lifted slowly, gaze steady, calm, threaded with gravity. That one glance unsettled Linda, though she masked it with a tightened posture. He said nothing more, only closed the journal with deliberate grace, as though sealing something important within. Jamal Pierce captured every second on his phone, his hands trembling not from fear but from awe. Through his lens, Elias appeared larger than the storm, a man cloaked not in noise but in quiet power. Jamal whispered to himself, "This doesn't feel like any contractor I've ever seen." The storm thundered again, shaking the glass so hard, some gasped. The lights flickered violently, plunging the lobby into semi-darkness before buzzing back alive. Murmurs rippled. People shifted uneasily. Even Karen's certainty faltered under the atmosphere's weight. But pride kept her planted. Sarah's mind raced. She remembered scrolling through a feature weeks ago in a finance magazine, an article about Carter Enterprises reshaping corporate landscapes under a leader described as reserved yet formidable. She recalled a photograph, a man in navy, calm, expression, leather journal in hand. Her stomach tightened as realization struck. Could this be the same Elias Carter she had read about? Her hands clutched her folders tighter. She scanned his posture, his quiet responses, the way even silence bent others toward him. It was all there. Recognition solidified like stone in her chest. She hadn't spoken yet, but the truth was dawning clearer with every second. Karen advanced, half a step closer, trying to regain dominance. "Sir, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Step back, identify yourself, or I will ensure you are removed immediately." Her voice, though commanding, cracked at the edges. Elias didn't budge. Instead, he shifted the journal back beneath his arm, posture tall, presence unshaken. The whisper he had given moments ago seemed to have altered the air itself. Confidence radiated from him, not loud but undeniable, and even without announcement, it began shifting dynamics. Linda, frustrated, barked, "Do you understand the risk you're creating? We have executives expecting order, clients expecting professionalism. You have already proven you don't belong." Those words drew scattered murmurs from bystanders. Some employees frowned, recognizing the sting behind them. Jamal zoomed closer, focusing on Elias's expression, calm, controlled, commanding. The storm pressed harder, lightning streaking the skyline, thunder shaking the floor beneath their shoes. The lobby buzzed with anticipation, as though the building itself sensed revelation approaching. People leaned closer, phones tilted higher. Sarah's heart raced. She couldn't hold her silence much longer. She knew she was certain now. The memory of the article wasn't vague, it was exact. Elias Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises. The man standing silent before Karen and Linda owned the very floors they guarded. Her throat tightened with urgency, but fear kept her words locked, for now. Elias glanced briefly around the lobby, eyes landing momentarily on Jamal with the phone, then on Sarah gripping her folders. His gaze lingered with quiet understanding, as though he knew who among them recognized truth already. Then, his attention returned to the two standing in his way. Karen pressed her hand flat against the elevator's cold steel. "You aren't going up. Not without proof. Not while I'm here." Elias's reply was simple, unyielding. "Then you will remain here, and I will remain here. But this will not end as you believe." The calmness in his tone made her falter. Her fingers twitched against the metal, betraying nerves she tried to hide. Linda shifted uneasily, glancing toward security, though none had arrived yet. For the first time, uncertainty crept into their expressions. Jamal whispered again, narrating for himself. "This isn't how people without power stand. This is different." His camera caught Karen's rigid defiance, Linda's frustration, and Elias's unshaken stillness. The contrast told its own story. The storm growled louder, as though waiting for a breaking point. Sarah finally whispered, softer than breath, "It really is him." Nobody nearby heard except perhaps the storm itself, but the admission anchored her conviction. She knew the truth, even if Karen and Linda remained blind to it. Elias didn't announce his name. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. By doing almost nothing, by simply whispering into his journal, by standing his ground, he had shifted the atmosphere entirely. Authority no longer felt certain in Karen's or Linda's hands. It radiated from him, quiet, yet undeniable. The TIS lobby buzzed, charged with anticipation. Employees sensed something monumental but couldn't articulate it. The moment was the storm that had pounded the skyscraper all morning began to ease, rain softening into a steady rhythm against the glass. The thunder that had once shaken the marble floors retreated into the distance, but inside the lobby, tension held tighter than ever. Dozens of eyes were fixed on the standoff by the executive elevator. Breaths shallow, silence stretched like a wire. Elias Carter stood unflinching, leather journal balanced under his arm, posture so composed it unsettled everyone. Watching, across from him, Karen Wells and Linda Hayes pressed harder, still convinced authority lay in their hands. Linda lifted her tablet again, fingers flying across the screen. "Sir, she snapped, though her voice quivered more than before. If you won't provide credentials, I'll check the system myself. Every contractor and visitor is logged. Her eyes narrowed with determination, though a flicker of unease lived behind them. Elias did not respond. His silence had become its own language, a statement sharper than words. The elevator doors remained, sealed behind Karen's rigid frame, gleaming with reflections of fluorescent lights and storm-streaked windows. Jamal Pierce, hidden by a column, zoomed his camera closer, pulse racing. He had never seen someone so calm under such relentless hostility. Linda's fingers tapped her tablet again, scrolling through the company's internal clearance list. Karen crossed her arms, lips curling. You're wasting your time, Linda. He's not in there. People like him never are. The sentence hung heavy in the lobby, cutting deeper than any procedural order. Several employees nearby shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Lynn felt her chest tighten. She had pieced together the truth already, but hearing Karen's words made her jaw clench. She studied Elias, his silence, his composure, the faint glow she'd glimpsed earlier from his journal. She knew. She was sure now. Then Linda's tablet chimed, screen pulsing in her hand. The words appeared bold across the display. Founder override. For a moment she froze, not believing what she saw. She blinked, tapped again, and the words reappeared, unmistakable. Beneath them, a profile opened. Elias Carter, founder and chief executive officer, Carter Enterprises. The man she had just threatened was not only an executive, but the very owner of the building, the leader whose name anchored the company's success. Her breath hitched audibly, and the color drained from her face. The tablet slipped slightly, in her hands nearly tumoring to the floor. Karen leaned closer, confused. What is it? Did you find his file? Linda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She staggered back a step, eyes locked on Elias as though seeing him for the first time. The tablet's glow illuminated her trembling hands. Karen frowned, snatched the device, and scanned the screen. The bold text seared into her vision. Her breath caught in her throat. She gasped sharply, the sound echoing across the lobby. No, this isn't... She stopped herself, words faltering. Her authority, her certainty, everything she had wielded seconds before crumbled in her grip. Elias remained perfectly still. He had not announced his title, had not shouted, had not demanded recognition. The truth revealed itself on its own, undeniable. He finally spoke, voice steady, calm, laced with quiet weight. Now you understand. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Employees exchanged wide-eyed looks. Jamal's camera captured every flicker. The moment Linda stumbled, the instant Karen's defiance shattered. The way Elias's composure contrasted their unraveling. It was the kind of footage that needed no editing, no narration. It was the truth in raw form. Sarah stepped forward, voice clear though her hands trembled around her folders. He's Elias Carter. He's the CEO. I read about him last month. Her words rang with conviction, breaking the tension like a bell. Heads turned toward her, confirming what the tablet had already declared. Karen's face drained of color. She staggered back, pressing herself against the elevator door she had guarded so fiercely. I didn't know, she stammered, her voice suddenly stripped of sharpness. I thought... You thought wrong, Elias interrupted gently. Not cruelly, but with precision that cut deeper than anger ever could. His eyes locked on hers, steady, controlled. And you acted on it. Linda tried to recover, words tumbling out. Mr. Carter, I assure you, this was all standard procedure. Elias raised a hand slightly, silencing her without volume. Procedure does not excuse assumption. The line landed heavy, undeniable. Jamal's lens trembled with the weight of the moment. He had witnessed countless small injustices, but rarely had he seen truth surface with such clarity. Watching, Karen stumble, Linda falter, and Elias remain unmoved filled him with something close to awe. Under his breath, he whispered, "When have you seen truth win out? Share below to keep this moment alive." He didn't realize the mic captured his words, that they would later echo across millions of screens, resonating far beyond the lobby. Tato. Storm outside continued to soften, rain easing to a drizzle, as though nature itself acknowledged the shift. But inside, the atmosphere did not calm. It crackled with realization, electric with the weight of exposure. Employees lowered their phones, no longer out of disinterest, but out of respect. Some bowed their heads slightly, embarrassed by what they had witnessed. Sarah stood straighter, proud that she had recognized him before the reveal, though humbled by how easily her colleagues had dismissed him. Karen's chest heaved, eyes wide, hands trembling against her blazer. I didn't mean—" She tried again, but the words carried no strength. Linda, too, seemed deflated, clutching her tablet like a shield that no longer offered protection. Elias looked between them, not gloating, not raising his voice. His presence alone carried the weight of judgment. "This building was designed to stand against storms," he said quietly, glancing toward the windows where rain trailed like fading scars. "Yet inside, people still create their own." Lobby fell silent again. The storm might have softened, but inside, the reckoning had only begun. The rain had slowed to a steady patter, droplets sliding down the skyscraper's glass like faint trails of silver. Outside, the storm was finally loosening its grip, but inside the lobby, energy crackled sharper than lightning. Dozens of employees lingered, phones lifted discreetly, breaths caught in suspense. They had just witnessed the tablet flash founder override, exposing Elias Carter as the CEO of Carter Enterprises. The truth had shattered Karen Wells and Linda Hayes, but the reckoning was far from complete. Elias shifted his stance, journal tucked securely beneath his arm, gaze moving between the two women who had spent the last half hour treating him as an intruder. His voice came low, even, but every word cut clean through the silence. "Tell me," he began, "why did you think I didn't belong?" The question dropped like a stone in still water. Karen's throat tightened. Her eyes darted, toward Linda, then back to Elias. I just followed the procedure," she muttered, though her voice cracked. "Procedure?" Elias repeated, tone firm but measured. "Procedure didn't tell you what to assume. The procedure didn't decide how you spoke to me. So I ask again, why did you think I didn't belong?" Murmurs rippled across the lobby. Bystanders shifted closer, no longer pretending to check messages or sip coffee. They wanted to hear every word. Linda straightened, trying to recover her authority, though the tablet still trembled faintly in her grip. "Mr. Carter, I admit the situation escalated more than necessary, but we are entrusted with protecting this space. I acted out of caution." Elias's gaze fixed on her, calm but piercing. "Caution is not the same as dismissal. Protecting is not the same as degrading. You didn't ask. You judged. You enforced your assumption as fact." Linda's jaw tightened. She tried to answer, but his voice overrode her attempt, steady and unyielding. Karen, desperate, took a step closer. "I wasn't trying to degrade anyone. I thought—" She reached out instinctively, her hand moving toward his sleeve, as if touching him might soften the severity of the moment. Elias stepped, back swiftly, his motion controlled, deliberate. His tone sharpened, though still calm. "Don't touch me." The firmness in those words silenced even the whispers. His boundary landed like a gavel, unmistakable, unchallengeable. Karen froze, hand suspended mid-air before retreating, her face reddening as the reality of her gesture sank in. Elias continued, voice steady but carrying the weight of the storm that had just passed. It was never about rules. It was about perception. You looked at me and decided where I should stand, how I should move, what I should prove. That is not policy. That is prejudice. Phones tilted higher. Employees who had been hesitant before now openly record. Support in the room shifted, visibly, heads nodding subtly, shoulders squaring as recognition spread. Jamal zoomed in, capturing the intensity of Elias's words, heart pounding as he realized the moment's magnitude. Linda exhaled sharply, struggling to maintain composure. You're misinterpreting. We treat everyone with the same expectations. Elias tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. Everyone? Do you tell every man in this lobby he looks like a contractor? Do you block every person before they've spoken? Or was it something you saw when I walked in that decided for you? Linda faltered. She tried to respond, but the words wouldn't form. Karen looked down, shame flickering across her features. Elias didn't raise his voice, but the firmness in it commanded the room. This company was built to face storms, but storms aren't just outside. They live in assumptions like yours. And until you confront them, they will always weaken us more than the weather ever could. Sarah Lynn, still clutching her folders, felt her chest rise with something she hadn't expected: courage. She glanced at her colleagues filming, then back at Elias. Her mind raced with memories of subtle comments in meetings, moments when she, too, had been overlooked or doubted. She whispered almost to herself, "I've seen this before." The words stirred Jamal, who caught her reflection in his lens. Without lowering his phone, he murmured, "Ever stood up to unfairness? Tell us your story below." The phrase, spoken low, threaded into his recording naturally, destined to resonate beyond the lobby. Karen tried one last attempt at defense. "I was only doing my job," Elias interrupted, his voice steady, cutting clean. "No, you were making your judgment. There's a difference." The lobby seemed to pulse with electricity, not from the storm, but from the accountability hanging in the air. Employees looked at each other, realizing they had all played roles, whether silent, observers, or complicit participants, in moments like this. Their recordings, their murmurs, their very presence would ensure this story could not be hidden. Elias let silence stretch before speaking again. "You both decided I did not belong. You stood firm on that belief until proof forced you otherwise. What happens to those who don't carry proof? What happens to the ones without titles to defend them? Do they leave quietly? Do they accept humiliation?" Karen swallowed hard, eyes wet, lips parted but unable to answer. Linda's hand tightened on her tablet, knuckles whitening. Neither offered defense now. Elias drew a breath, his calm heavier than thunder. Belonging isn't given. It is recognized. And when recognition fails, power is abused. That cannot stand in this building. Not while I am here. His words landed with finality. Around the lobby, the energy shifted further. Employees lowering phones not from disinterest, but from respect. Silence pressed again, thick and charged, as though the building itself was listening. Sarah inhaled deeply, courage building as she looked directly at Karen and Linda. "He's right," she said firmly. Her voice carried further than she expected, breaking into the charged quiet. "I've seen the same treatment in smaller ways. It's easy to pretend it's a procedure, but it's not. It's an assumption." Heads turned. A few employees nodded subtly, affirming her statement. The weight of solidarity began to take form. Elias inclined his head slightly towards Sarah, acknowledgement flickering in his eyes. He turned back to Karen and Linda, delivering the final blow not with anger, but with measured certainty. You wanted to decide where I belonged. Now I decide where you do. Neither woman could respond. Their silence spoke louder than any excuse. Outside, the storm had fully passed, leaving the skyline washed clean. Sunlight broke weakly through the clouds, scattering gold against the wet marble floors. Inside, the atmosphere remained electric, charged with consequence. Jamal lowered his phone, slowly heart racing. He knew what he had captured wasn't just confrontation. It was truth delivered with unshakable calm. His recording would travel far beyond the lobby, carried by the very words Elias had spoken. And though Karen and Linda stood silent, the shift was undeniable. Power had moved, accountability had arrived, and nothing would return to the way it was before. The storm had passed, leaving streaks of pale sunlight cutting through the glass, spreading across the lobby's polished marble floor like golden ribbons. The air smelled faintly of rain, clean and sharp, as if the city itself had been washed, free of the chaos that had raged moments earlier. But inside, tension still lingered. Dozens of eyes remained fixed on Elias Carter, whose steady posture commanded the room without a raised voice. Karen Wells stood rigid, arms clutched across her chest, her once sharp tone swallowed by shame. Linda Hayes lingered beside her, tablet pressed tightly to her chest, face pale, confidence collapsed into silence. The crowd waited, breath held, for what would happen next. Elias shifted the leather journal beneath his arm and slid his phone from his pocket with calm precision. His expression remained composed, but a subtle weight in his movements carried finality. He tapped the screen. Once, then again, each motion deliberate, controlled. The room stilled, the faint hum of air conditioning the only sound cutting through the silence. His thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed firmly. "Protocol Gold," he said softly, voice clear but steady. Almost immediately, the sound of devices chirping filled the air. Linda's tablet screen flickered, flashing once before a bold red notification appeared. Access revoked. She gasped audibly, hands trembling as the tablet went dark, locked beyond her control. She tapped frantically, swiping at the dead screen, but it refused to respond. "No, no, this can't be right," she stammered, voice shrill with panic. Karen pulled her phone from her blazer pocket, fingers shaking. She swiped at the screen, only to see the same message blaze across it. "Account disabled. Contact administrator." Her eyes widened, horror spreading across her face. She clutched the device like it might suddenly reverse itself, but every attempt only reinforced the truth. She no longer had access. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Employees glanced at one another, murmurs rising as realization spread. Whatever authority Karen and Linda once wielded had just been erased in seconds. Their dominance, once projected so confidently, had been stripped away with the quiet push of a button. Linda's voice cracked, pleading, "Mr. Carter, please, I can explain." Elias raised a hand slightly, silencing her without force. His voice cut through the air, calm yet resolute. "Your explanation is not needed. Your actions spoke louder than words could." Karen's knees wobbled, but she straightened quickly, clinging to a fragment of dignity. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered, as though ignorance excused the behavior. Elias's gaze fixed on her, steady, unflinching. "Ignorance is not justification. Respect should never be tied to recognition. Position does not grant humanity. That truth was forgotten the moment you blocked me." The words pierced the air, heavier than thunder. No one dared move. Employees stood transfixed, phones lowered now not from disinterest, but from reverence. Linda's lips quivered as she clutched her lifeless tablet. "Please reconsider. This will ruin everything I've built here." Elias's tone sharpened, though it remained calm. "You built authority on assumption, not integrity. Structures like that collapse quickly. He paused, letting the words settle across the room. And collapse they have. Karen turned toward the crowd, desperate. You all saw I was only doing my job. But her colleagues looked away, some shaking their heads subtly, others refusing to meet her eyes. The tide had shifted and support evaporated. Her voice, once biting, now echoed hollow in the marble. Chamber. Elias slipped his phone back into his pocket, his journal still tucked firmly under his arm. Outside, the clouds parted further, beams of sunlight piercing the skyline. The lobby brightened, as though reflecting clarity after a storm. Justice itself seemed to color the room. Jamal Pierce lowered his phone slightly, recording still active. His chest swelled with awe at what he had just captured. Consequences not whispered in private offices, but delivered openly, undeniably, in front of all. His voice, barely audible, murmured, "This is what accountability looks like." Employees shifted, whispers filling the silence like waves against stone. Sarah Lynn, still gripping her folders, felt tears prick her eyes. She had seen injustice before, but rarely had she witnessed it met so swiftly, so directly. A sense of change pulsed in her chest, something more powerful than any policy manual she had studied. Linda's shoulders slumped, tablet dangling loosely, in her grip. What happens now? She asked quietly, eyes darting toward the floor. Elias's reply was firm. Now you step aside. You will no longer represent this company, not in this building, not under my name. Karen's lips parted, ready to protest, but no sound emerged. Her face flushed, then drained pale as reality sank in. The authority she had clung to had vanished, replaced by silence and shame. The lobby doors opened, and two members of building, security entered, their uniforms dark against the glowing marble. They moved calmly, no rush, no aggression, but their presence underscored finality. They walked toward Karen and Linda, nodding respectfully at Elias before pausing at his side. Elias inclined his head slightly toward them. Escort them out. Their access has already been revoked. Karen's body stiffened. Please don't, she began, but her voice broke under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. Linda attempted one last appeal. We dedicated years. Here. Doesn't that count for something? Elias's expression didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. Years do not erase choices. Dedication without respect is nothing more than control. That has no place here. The guards motioned gently, giving Karen and Linda no opportunity to resist. They stepped reluctantly toward the exit, shoulders sagging, steps heavy. Whispers followed them, but no voices spoke in their defense. Phones tilted, capturing the walk of shame that mirrored the arrogance shown earlier. As the glass doors closed behind them, the lobby seemed to exhale, tension releasing like air from a sealed chamber. The storm outside had cleared entirely now, skies pale blue streaked with fading clouds. The glass doors closed with a soft thud, sealing Karen and Linda outside. Their departure left the lobby suspended in silence, not the strained kind that had gripped the air moments earlier, but one steeped in release. The storm had ended, both inside and out. Sunlight now poured unhindered through the tall panes, spilling across polished marble in golden streaks. It felt as though the building itself had exhaled, relieved of a weight it had carried too long. Elias Carter remained near. The executive elevator, journal secure beneath his arm, posture unbroken. His stillness no longer unsettled the crowd. It commanded respect. Employees lowered their phones, some out of reverence, others out of quiet shame for recording what they had allowed to unfold. Every eye remained on him, waiting, breath caught, in collective anticipation. He did not rush to fill the silence. He allowed it to settle, to grow into something meaningful. When he finally spoke, his tone carried reflection rather than anger, each word chosen with intention. What happened here today is not about two people. It is about us all. Culture is not written in policies or posted on walls. It is lived, moment to moment, choice to choice. And when that culture fails, it fails everyone. The words landed softly but firmly, echoing through the marble chamber. Heads bowed, eyes lowered. Several employees shifted uncomfortably, recognizing themselves not as spectators, but as participants in a workplace that had allowed silence to excuse bias. Elias continued, voice steady, almost like a teacher guiding, rather than condemning. Karen and Linda made choices, but they did not act in isolation. Their certainty grew from something deeper, an environment where assumptions go unchallenged, where quiet nods and diverted eyes give those assumptions space to live. That must end now. The lobby felt lighter, though his words weighed heavily. He was not punishing. He was holding up a mirror. Sarah Lynn stood rooted near the cafe counter, folders still in her hands, heart pounding. She had watched the entire encounter, from the receptionist's first words to the shocking reveal, and now to this moment of reckoning. Elias's voice resonated with her because she too had felt small dismissals, overlooked glances, words that told her she did not belong. Hearing him frame change as responsibility gave her hope it could be different. Jamal Pierce lowered his phone fully, recording paused. He had caught everything he needed for the world to see, but now he wanted to listen, not as a witness through a screen, but as someone present in the room. His chest swelled with something more profound than awe, gratitude. Elias shifted slightly, letting sunlight illuminate him. "Justice is not humiliation," he said. "It is correct. Today was not about punishment, but about clarity. This company cannot grow while carrying hidden storms in its walls. Those storms harm not only those targeted, but everyone who accepts them as normal." The message settled like sunlight after rain, warming even those who had initially turned away. Employees glanced at one another, their faces etched with realization. No one wanted to return to silence. Sarah raised her head, catching Elias's gaze. He gave a slight nod, an acknowledgement without words, a gesture that felt like encouragement. Her shoulders straightened. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. "This is what leadership looks like." Elias turned slowly, addressing the crowd as though each person mattered individually. "You will decide what this workplace becomes. You will choose whether fairness is a principle or merely a slogan. Accountability begins here, but it does not end here. It follows you to your desks, your meetings, your decisions." For the first time that morning, the lobby did not feel like a battleground. It felt like a classroom, a place of transformation. Employees no longer clutched their devices for spectacle. They held them loosely, some even sliding them into pockets and bags, acknowledging that respect sometimes requires presence without documentation. Jamal thought of all the unfair moments he had experienced. Teachers doubting his ability, strangers questioning his presence, managers overlooking his voice. Watching Elias stand calmly against dismissal had sparked something inside him. He whispered, "This changes everything." The lobby seemed brighter now, marble floors reflecting sunlight instead of storm shadows. A collective breath had replaced the earlier tension. The transformation was visible, not only in Elias's words, but in the posture of those listening. Backs straightened, heads lifted, silence turned into attention. Elias glanced toward the elevator doors behind him, then back at the employees. "We cannot control storms outside," he said, gesturing toward the glistening windows where sunlight dried raindrops. "But we can control storms within. We decide whether they continue or end. Today, we choose for them to end." The statement drew a ripple of nods, murmurs of agreement. The cultural shift was not complete, but a seed had been planted, one that could grow beyond the lobby into every floor above. Sarah felt the words reverberate in her chest. She thought of younger colleagues, interns like Jamal, who deserved an environment that lifted rather than diminished. She whispered under her breath, "It starts here." Elias paused again, scanning the room, ensuring every word anchored. Let today be remembered not as embarrassment, but as a turning point. A moment when we chose dignity over assumption, inclusion over exclusion, courage over silence. The crowd remained hushed, but the silence had changed. It was no longer hesitation, but respect. Jamal raised his phone again, not to film but to lock the recording. He knew the video would resonate beyond the walls. But he also knew the more profound change would happen in the choices made by those standing around him. He murmured again, quieter this time. Ever stood up to unfairness? Tell us your story, below. The line would later surface online, attached to his video, sparking conversations across cities. Elias exhaled softly, shoulders relaxing slightly. He had not raised his voice once, yet the impact carried more force than thunder. He stepped toward the elevator, the journal still under his arm, phone secured back in his pocket. Employees parted instinctively, giving him a clear path, not out of fear but respect. He stopped briefly before entering, turning back to them one last time. Culture does not shift because of speeches. It shifts because of actions. Let this moment live in how you treat each other, not only today but tomorrow and beyond. The words wrapped around the room like sunlight warming chilled skin. Sarah's eyes glistened. Jamal's chest swelled. Others stood straighter, the weight of responsibility sinking in. The lobby no longer felt heavy with judgment. It felt lighter, freer, like a storm had passed and fresh air had filled the space. As Elias stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding open smoothly, quiet applause began. Not loud, not forced, but soft, respectful, building from one corner until it carried across the entire lobby. He did not bow or wave. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the sound as the doors closed behind him. The applause lingered even after. The elevator ascended, echoing against marble walls. It wasn't a celebration alone. It was commitment, a promise to carry what had been learned into every corner of the building. Outside, the sun broke entirely through the clouds, and the sky washed clear. Inside, clarity reigned too, brighter than any storm. The elevator doors slid open, polished steel gleaming beneath the softened glow of the lobby lights. The storm outside had dissolved completely, replaced by calm skies washed pale blue, sunlight warming the marble floor like gold leaf pressed into stone. The air inside the building carried stillness, not the heavy kind of silence that had hung earlier, but serenity, renewal, the aftermath of a battle resolved. Elias Carter stood poised, journal still tucked beneath his arm, presence unshaken. Every eye in the lobby followed his movements, reverence replacing the judgment that had shadowed him when he first entered. He stepped toward the elevator, his shoes striking the marble with a steady rhythm, each footfall echoing across the vast chamber. Employees, who minutes earlier had doubted him, now parted quietly, forming a natural corridor. Not a single voice interrupted. Phones lowered, shoulders straightened, eyes lifted. This was no longer a spectacle, it was recognition, an acknowledgement of what authentic leadership looked like. Elias paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, bracing for his closing words. His expression remained calm, his voice quiet but carrying strength that filled every corner. You saw a problem, he said, eyes sweeping across the faces gathered. But I was the solution. The line struck like the final note of a symphony. Heads nodded, eyes widened, hearts stirred. Applause rose again, soft at first, then building, not with the chaotic clatter of celebration, but with the rhythm of respect. It echoed against the marble walls like rainfall returning after drought, gentle, cleansing, complete of meaning. The elevator doors began to slide shut, sealing him inside. Just before they closed completely, sunlight caught the journal's cover, making it glint like a symbol, then disappeared with him into the upper floors. The lobby remained, but something intangible had shifted. The room felt lighter, like the building had been rebuilt not in brick or glass, but in spirit. Jamal Pierce lowered his phone, video saved, but for the first time since he began recording, he didn't look at the screen. He looked around at the colleagues beside him, seeing the recognition dawning in their eyes, the shared awareness of having witnessed a moment greater than themselves. His thoughts swirled, not only about the footage that would soon ripple across the world, but about the lesson etched permanently into him. He whispered, words almost to himself, "Change doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing up." Sarah Lynn clutched her folders, heart still pounding from everything she had witnessed. She had read about Elias before, admired him from a distance, but seeing him here, watching him dismantle bias with nothing more than composure and truth, had changed her. She exhaled slowly, her mind already racing through meetings she would attend, conversations she would no longer allow to slide unchallenged. The storm outside had ended, but she carried its lesson inside her chest like lightning waiting to strike injustice. Around them, employees exchanged looks that weren't casual glances, but unspoken promises. The lobby was no longer just a place of marble and glass. It had become a stage where truth had demanded to be heard. The applause that had started at Elias's words lingered even after he disappeared, not fading completely but living in every nod, every glance, every decision, not yet made. For Jamal, the video was more than footage. It was testimony. He knew when he shared it, people from every corner of the globe would see themselves in it. People who had been dismissed, doubted, silenced. They would see Elias's restraint, his calm strength, his refusal to justify his worth, and they would feel vindicated. They would hear his line, "You saw a problem, but I was the solution," and carry it as their own. Jamal imagined the comments already. Stories of unfair encounters, moments of bias, confessions from strangers across cities. His whisper earlier would anchor the post, and the caption would not just ask for views, it would demand reflection. Sarah glanced at Jamal, recognizing the spark in his eyes. She smiled faintly, knowing the world would soon watch what they had witnessed. "People need to see this," she said quietly. "They will," Jamal replied, voice steady, conviction carved. In his tone, the atmosphere inside the lobby has transformed fully now. Sunlight spread wider, banishing shadows from corners. Conversations began again, but softer, thoughtful, reflective. Employees no longer spoke about tasks or schedules. They talked about what they had seen, about culture, about dignity. The storm had left scars, but those scars were already shaping something more substantial. Above them, the elevator carried Elias upward, but his presence remained anchored in the lobby, woven into the air like a vow. His final words replayed silently in every mind. "You saw a problem, but I was the solution." They carried weight because they were more than defense, they were promise. Promise that leadership is not posture or power, but principle lived, openly, even when tested. Jamal unlocked his phone again, scrolling briefly through the footage. His heart raced at the clarity of the recording, at the way every second told a story without needing embellishment. The video ended in applause, sunlight pouring across marble, employees no longer spectators but believers. He knew exactly how he would end it when he shared, with Elias's final words, then the caption. This isn't just a story, it's a call to change. Like, share, subscribe, and let's end these habits together. Where are you watching from? He whispered it aloud, testing the cadence. It sounded right. It sounded necessary. Sarah looked out the tall windows, where the sky stretched clear after the storm. She thought of all the storms she had carried. Silently, storms others had endured without notice. Today felt like the first time she had seen one end, not with more silence, but with truth breaking through. She nodded faintly, promising herself she would not let the clarity fade. The lobby emptied slowly, employees dispersing toward elevators, stairwells, and offices. But no one was left unchanged. Some walked with phones tucked away, others with conversations hushed but meaningful. Each carried a piece of what had transpired, each knowing accountability was no longer distant. It had arrived in their lobby, demanded presence, and refused to leave. Elias's absence did not feel like a departure. It felt